Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast, where we discuss all things ranging from love, relationships, authenticity, fulfillment, to lessons from plant medicine journeys, inner healing, and living your truth. I'm not your teacher, I'm only your fellow student. Occasionally, you also get to hear some of my own healing process and journey back to love. The point of the program? That you take away at least one actionable piece of knowledge that supports you in expanding whatever aspect of your life your heart most desires. My name is Cesar Rodriguez. I will be your host, and I am honored to have you here. Happy listening. Welcome to the Love is Our Nature podcast. I'm here again with a great friend of mine that I met here in Santa Teresa, Costa Rica. Her name is Nicolin. Hi, Nicolin.
Hi, Cesar. Thank you for having me.
How are you?
I'm good. I mean, how can you complain? I'm sitting in one of the most beautiful places in the world.
Yeah, this is like a paradise down here. And it's so funny. We're in this home particularly, which is where one of the early chapters for me started here in Santa Teresa, right? The former Templo Lila, right? It has a guest house, and we're like in the guest house of former Templo Lila now.
Definitely.
We say former Templo Lila because we moved away, Darren and I. The house is up for sale right now, in fact, if anybody's looking to buy an epic house.
Ooh, it's beautiful. It would be worth it.
So yeah, we're here in Santa Teresa, and I met Nicolin way back. I think it was the end of March or the beginning of April of 2021, last year.
Yeah.
Right. Today is October 4th of 2022, and wow, it's been a while now, huh?
I was thinking about this the other day. It's kind of crazy because I feel like we both came to this place. You came from Miami, I came from New York, and we were both kind of in this place of like figuring out like, just like touching the water. Like, is there something here?
Yeah.
And we've stayed in contact obviously the whole entire time, and we've both been going to different places. I've gone back to New York, you've gone back to Miami, and we've kept in touch, but our lives are just completely different compared to the time that we met. I mean,
this is like
kind
of like I'm engaged.
You're engaged. You have a kid on the way. Like,
yes.
it's just really interesting to see how we're both in a very similar position and how so dramatically different everything is.
Yeah, life is definitely happening. Life is moving, and the reason I wanted to bring Nicolin on the show is because you are someone who, for me, like resembles like 90% of people out there, just that have lived in the city, they went to university, they got a degree to get a good paying job, a secure job somewhere. And I know at one point, I was someone like very dedicated to my job. The last job I had was, before I started my company, it's going to be 10 or 11 years now, so, but I remember that time very clearly before I became an entrepreneur I have to go to work to make money. And sure enough, if I look at most of my friends from high school or college, they are in a similar situation where like you're working the job and you feel like you have to. And in our culture, we don't really look at our jobs like, oh, it's what brings us aliveness, or this is something that I love to do. That's why I go do it. And why I'm so inspired by you is because you, in spite of being like just in that, what we might call the rat race, you've found a window to create a beautiful chapter for yourself to come down here in Costa Rica. But there was something very different between you and a lot of other remote workers that we actually started this WhatsApp group with. which in fact we were some of the original members
Original
of the
OG crew.
Santa Teresa remote working tribe.
You do a better job of admin than I do.
Yeah, we're actually the admins of the group now.
Yep.
Shout out to Brian who started it way back when, and what was very different was that, you know, obviously I stuck around, and I would see people in that group say, "Hey guys, I'm selling my surfboard for this much money. Let me know if you're interested. I'm selling it because I'm going back to reality now." Mm-hmm. Right? Mm-hmm. And I would see that message, and it would really hit me like, man, that's weird. And in a way, it's a little bit sad as well, because you've loved it here, right? That person's clearly loved it here. Now they're like, I'm going back to reality. So I can't help but think, what's this reality you're going back to? You know, that you call it reality, in essence, implying that this has been like some dream life or some dreamland, some fantasy
that you can't have.
Right. So now you're going to go back to reality. So the difference between you and a lot of the other remote workers, and maybe both of us, is that you're like, you know what? Fuck that. I want to make this my reality.
We stayed. Yeah. I think we somehow figured out how to stay.
Yeah. So that's what I find really inspiring, that without having all the T's crossed and I's dotted, you're like, I don't know how exactly I'm going to make it work, but I'm coming back. Right. And you came back, and you come back. So let's talk a little more about that. But before we even jump into that, why don't we give the people listening now an idea of what your life was like before Costa Rica? Right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Like what you did for work, what were you went to college sort of thing, and what your city life was like in New York. And by the way, she's from Australia, if you didn't recognize her accent.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe even how you ended up in New York.
Well, yeah, I hope I still have the accent. So a lot of my Australian friends say to me, like, what is that American twang you picked up? I'm like, oh, God. So, yeah, originally grew up in Sydney, Australia. And about 7 years ago, I ended up moving over to New York City. So I had a background actually in film publicity. So I did a lot of film publicity for films, European and American films that were going to cinema. So worked at 2 film distribution companies at the time. And then one day I kind of had this idea where I just woke up and I was just like, I've got to move to New York City. Like, it was just like something that I just woke up one day and I became obsessed with the concept. I just had to move over there. And so I ended up moving over there about 7-8 years ago now. And I was lucky to find a job. Literally was just winging it. Sold all my stuff in in Australia.
So even back then, you're already pretty adventurous.
Even back then, I was kind of, I knew that I had three months to kind of like take a chance. I knew that, to try and find a job, otherwise I would be, overstaying my visa. And thankfully, a PR agency decided to hire me. So I've been working in publicity, public relations for the past 7-8 years at some of the top PR US firms in the country, representing clients such as Samuel Adams, Jim Beam, Rosetta Stone, mostly CPG clients. But yeah, it was a whirlwind. And then I guess, what happened to a lot of people, 2020 hit. And I think if anyone has, a marketing or PR background, they recognize, the speed of PR. It can be a very intense job. A lot of deadlines to work with, especially agency life is kind of like considered the grueling process, right? So I think, when the pandemic hit, all of a sudden, a lot of companies were losing their clients like left, right, and center. And I was on an E3 visa at the time. And I was petrified that I was essentially going to lose my visa. So I was working really hard and, sometimes working upwards of, 12, 13, sometimes 14-hour days, because it was just, I can't lose my job. I can't lose my ticket to stay in New York. And I think, eventually people realized things weren't going back to normal. Well, the new normal. And I think, the workload, I think, definitely got better, but still was that intensity and that level. And I think what happens is, especially in a place like New York City, where you had quarantine measures, you essentially isolated. People had to stick very closely to them. I think looking back on it now, I just became really depressed. You know, I was kind of like, you know, stuck in my bedroom, you know, with, you know, 4 white walls. I didn't really have any view like out into nature.
Do you have housemates?
I had housemates, yeah, at the time. But even then, I think, you know, apartments in New York City aren't really made to live in. They're made to sleep in. You don't really have, you know, the space in the room. So living with 3 other roommates at the time, and as well had a few other like personal things like happen. And I just kind of got to the point where I was just, I can't even explain it, but I was miserable. I remember times when I would have to do a lot of new business pitches. I remember times like I would just be at my computer, just like crying. Just I couldn't stop crying. And then there was this new business pitch that I had to like go on. So I'd be like icing my eyes with like ice cold water and just like pulling myself together and then jumping online and I couldn't even explain it. I just felt so stuck and just so unhappy. And it was, I couldn't really even pinpoint like the reason why. I think looking back on it now, I think for a lot of things in my life, I think I've used a lot of distractions over time. Like, you know, whenever, especially in places like cities, right? Whenever you're kind of like down or low, you kind of distract yourself with something. You know, you'll find a friend to go out to dinner with, or you'll do more work, or, you know, you'll find anything to distract yourself. And I think what was really interesting about the pandemic is all of a sudden you couldn't like busy yourself out of problems. You were really like in your room, isolated, having to reflect of like, hang on a second, is this a feeling that I've, you know, perhaps been feeling for a while? Or is this something that, you know, I've essentially been distracting myself by? Or is this just based on environments? And I think, you know, what happened is at the time I had a friend, I was unable to return to Australia because Australia had very, very strict lockout laws. And my dad was sick at the time, and normally I go home for Christmas. So I was really upset by the fact that I couldn't go back for Christmas. And a friend suggested, hey, like, why don't you go to Costa Rica for Christmas? I did an amazing like surf and yoga retreat. I'm like, oh, like, to be honest, I hadn't heard anything about Costa Rica. Never been on my list. And I was kind of, I remember like looking up different places. I remember going to Google Maps because she told me that she did her surf and yoga retreat in Montezuma. And I was literally on Google Maps, like trying to find like places like close to where she went. And I saw this place like Santa Teresa, and I like did some online research on it. I'm like, all right, I'll start my week there. I'll go for Christmas there. And I guess like as soon as I landed here, it was just immediately just like this weight that was just lifted off my shoulders. And I'll still remember the feeling, just the concept of, you know, when you've kind of been in your bedroom looking kind of like at your 4 walls, and all of a sudden you're on the beach and you have this, you know, peripheral vision, you know, like 180 degrees, where I think, you know, you're looking from like left to right, just staring at nature. I think I've become a huge believer now in the ability to be able to see like different angles. I think when I look at New York, you're so confined to like a grid system, right? You're just like looking straight ahead. You have buildings on the right, you have buildings on the left. You literally have a very limited vision. And I think you come here, I mean, even just sitting here right now, it's like a 360 view, like right around. And
we can hear the monkeys now.
And hear the monkeys, exactly. And I think something really powerful just like happened when I got here. And I think the community that I met here, and people who were like-minded as me, who were, you know, just searching for something different, searching for something else, something better. It was an experience for me. And I think, you know, for a while I was going back. I was very, very fortunate that I had a company that allowed me to work remotely here for a large chunk of time, around 4 or 5 months.
Yeah. And lots of people's jobs went remote as well during that time, right? So that was kind of like a big opportunity all of a sudden for people. I think that was like a boom in remote workers.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm really lucky. I know a lot of companies, didn't really allow people to leave kind of like their cities, for example. Like I was very fortunate that I had managers that allowed me to be in Costa Rica. I think, they sensed that I think maybe, something wasn't right. And I think as soon as they probably saw that I was in Costa Rica, they probably just saw me light up, I think, in comparison. So I'm lucky that they were, they let me stay here, because I think if they hadn't, I probably would have gone back to New York City and actually never discovered that I could have this, that I could move here. So I'm really, really lucky that I was given that opportunity, because it allowed me to, I think most things in my life I've always been very impulsive. Like I think New York was like, I woke up one day, I'm like, I want to move to New York. Here was a very gradual decision.
Yeah.
It wasn't something that just like happened instantly. It took like a really long time for that like seed to be planted and things to grow.
So walk us through the timeline then. So you arrived here, like what, March? No, Christmas, actually.
Christmas, yeah,
Oh,
Christmas
wow. Yeah,
2020.
So you were in Santa Teresa way before me. I arrived here in March. So Christmas 2020, and then you stayed 3 months?
Yeah, I stayed, from memory, I think I stayed about maybe 4 or 5 months.
Well, because you didn't have to do a visa run after 3 months?
You're right. I think I
Or
ended
did you
up,
do like
I
a
think
Nicaragua
I think I
border run?
overstayed by like a month. Oh, it was. I stayed
we're
for
not gonna
5
tell
months
anybody.
because at that time, they had entered a new rule that if you had arrived before the pandemic,
Oh,
you
yeah,
could,
I remember that.
you could stay.
Okay. So you stayed 5 months. So you
Mm-hmm.
left like what, May? Back to New York?
Yeah, I went back to New York
Okay.
for summer.
And at that time, did you have a plan already to come back before you even left, or what happened?
I think I knew that I wanted to come back, but at that stage, nothing was concrete. Yeah, so I guess that was 2021, and then I ended up coming back in November.
So you were gone between May and November. What was it like going back to New York City and like continuing to work from there, doing your life there after having spent 5 months here?
Yeah. I mean, in between, I had gone back to New York twice before I had
Okay.
decided to move here.
Right.
So,
And the first time you went back was between May and November of 2021.
yes.
So what was that first time back in New York like?
I think, good question. I think in a way, what's interesting, I think, where like any new place you kind of go to and then kind of return to home, it's this concept of you kind of feel like no time has actually happened at all. You know what I mean? I kind of got back there and I didn't really feel like I'd ever left. I think you feel different. I felt personally different. I felt like I had changed, but I think kind of going back to New York City, it felt in a way at the same time that I had never left and that I hadn't been away. And I think you pick up the same habits, the same routines very, very quickly. Like I was very different in the sense of how I structured my life here and my routine. I think as soon as I went back to New York, everything just kind of went back to the same. And I think that's probably, over time, like spending time there, you kind of begin to crave like this old structure or this old lifestyle that you used to have. I mean, for me, I think one of the biggest things that was so important for me here when I came over here for the surf and yoga retreat, that's where I learned how to surf. And that was a huge reason why I fell in love with this place. I fell in love with the ocean. I fell in love with surfing. So for me, I'd be waking up at that time. I'd be waking up at 5:30 in the morning, going for a surf session before I then had to like log on for work at 8 a.m. And I think for me, the key difference was I was waking up and I was starting the day for myself. I was starting the day in nature where I'd just be, sitting out in the ocean, watching like fish fly, watching the sun come up. Honestly would feel like a Disney film. Like it really, really would. And then I would go to work and I would just instantly just be in a better mood because I felt like I had done something for me that day. And I think when I went back to New York, I very quickly went back into the routine of, just rolling out of bed maybe like 15, 20 minutes before I had to start work. And then that was my day. It didn't feel like I was living for anything more other than my job.
That is very interesting. And that's happened to me as well. So like having experienced how nice it is to dedicate some time for yourself before starting work, what do you think had you like not, wake up a few hours before you have to go to work while you're in New York to dedicate some time for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, abs- absolutely. I think that's what I would like to do. For
Mm-hmm.
some reason, I found the process easier to do here.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know why. I
Mm-hmm.
don't know why that was. I don't know why. I think it's very easy to say, I'm like, well, why don't you just repeat that same
Yeah.
process, where you were in New York compared to here? I think that's an excellent like thought.
Yeah, I don't think there's a right answer to that. I was just
Yeah.
curious because I don't even know exactly, but if I speculate, I
I found
think,
it harder.
yeah. Well, here is something interesting. I think, everything is energy, right? So like environments have energy, and nature, if you look at it, I mean, we can look at it right now where we are, and it moves very slowly,
Hmm.
right?
It's the pace,
So,
yeah.
so I think the environment here is so slow, whereas when you're in the city, it's very activated, but in a way that it's just kind of like go, go, go all the time is what I mean by activated. Like it moves very fast.
Everything's like an instant transaction.
What do you mean by that?
I think, being in New York City, you're kind of going into the coffee shop, they're
Mm,
taking your order really quickly, getting you in and
mm,
out. Even sitting down at restaurants, you know what I mean? They want to turn the tables over really quickly so they can
mm-hmm.
then do the next seating. Um,
Yeah.
I think, everything is just has to move so quickly just because of, yeah, there's so many people. I think here, like to your point, everything just feels so calm
Yeah.
and it's just this beautiful pace to it.
Yeah, and we get such an early bedtime all of a sudden. I still don't know exactly how come. I thought it was because of the early sunset, but still, like even in the city, we're still going on about our business even past sunset. I know where
Hmm.
when I was in Miami, I would work well past sunset. The sun would go
Hmm.
down, and I'd still be in the office another hour, and then I'd leave. It's already like 8 p.m., and then I'd go home, dinner, and like end up going to bed really late.
Hmm.
Right. So yeah, then you don't have that time in the morning. Right. So there's something about living here in the jungle or beach jungle that somehow it just pulls you to go to bed early. What do you think that is?
I think to your point, when I was working in New York City, your routine is very much determined by your work. It's determined by your deadlines, determined by when you start the day, to your point, when you finish your jobs. I think the fascinating thing about this place, and I think why I gravitated it to it so much, is your day is structured by what nature is doing.
Mm.
It's kind of like you decide what times you want to surf based on the swell. You want to finish your day so you can go down and catch the beautiful sunset on the beach. Even down to the moon,
Mm-hmm.
what the moon is doing. Your day is very much structured by what nature is doing. And
Yeah.
I think that's such a beautiful contrast to organize your day based on what's happening. Like even, I want to be inside on the hottest parts of the day, from
Yeah.
like from 10 to 2, that's when I want to be sitting and doing my work because I don't want to be outside in the sun.
Yeah.
So you structure your day based on, what's happening around you.
Yeah. We have. This is what I referred to at one time in this video I did, the like at the very beginning of 2022, when I was kind of like summing up my experience of the previous year and how come I was deciding to stay in Costa Rica. I started referring to city life as like artificial life,
Mm-hmm.
and I think you're kind of pointing to the same thing where we have all these modern comforts or technological conveniences that create like this artificial life, right? Like we can switch on the lights,
Mm-hmm.
which are everywhere in the city, and like there's no reason to slow down or start going to bed when like you can just turn on the lights and the electricity's there. And it's not just electricity, it's also like all your devices and also like what everybody else is doing, right? So like somebody like will call you and like at 8 9 p.m. and want to chat and like because the day's still going, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're just immersed in nature, you can't help but like just feel
Mm-hmm.
that wait, everything's slowing down now. The sun went down, You can hear things quieting down. You can start hearing some of the crickets, and it's time to go to bed. You know, like let's wind down. So yeah, it's maybe, and it's not like we're out here living in a cave like in the Stone Age either. You know, like
Yeah.
I mean, I'm recording this on my laptop through the microphones. We have the electricity. You know, so that's something that you actually spoke to when you filled out one of my questionnaires to prepare in preparation for this, was that sometimes people will think that like going and living somewhere beautiful in nature, like you have to sacrifice all of those conveniences, like you don't get to have a fridge, or you're barefoot in the jungle, like you say, you know, and that's not quite true. You know, we live full lives. We have Wi-Fi, you know, we work on our laptops.
Exactly. I think that's the thing. It's kind of like I still want to have an income. I still want to be able to, afford things and set myself up for
Yeah,
retirement.
we're not hunting for our food yet.
Yeah,
You know?
exactly. There's
Even
still,
though that would be kind of cool, I might want to try that myself.
yeah, there's still everything I want. And yeah, I know we kind of, last time we kind of spoke, we spoke about, the concept of having intent about like wanting to do these things. And I think for people's background, I quit my job at the end of last year.
Oh, you're spoiling the story already.
Oh, I'm spoiling the story.
Getting ahead of us.
Getting ahead.
Right. Well,
But-
let's actually talk about that, right? So maybe we drifted a bit, but to get back to that, before we get to you quitting your job, so bring us up to speed, right? So you were gone May to November. You came back November. Mm-hmm. Well, what had you say I'm going back?
I missed it.
You just missed it.
I just felt like there was just something like calling me there.
Yeah. Okay. So then you came back.
I came back.
But with what intention now?
So I came
Because this is
back-
recent now, right? This is like, wow, it feels recent. I mean, it's almost been a year, but I remember that. It wasn't that long ago that you were like, I'm coming back, and I think I'm coming back like looking to see how I can make this more permanent. Was that the case already or not yet?
Yeah, definitely. So I think I'm like trying to think because I feel like I've been back and forth so many different times now. I'm trying to like remember the months, but I feel like I came back here, and then I believe I went back to New York again after I came back. Afterwards. And then I think I had, for me, what really was a catalyst, I think, for making this decision was my dad's health had been like declining. And that was, a time when I was unable to go back to Australia, and around like November, that's when Australia finally opened their borders and they announced, all right, we'll let Australians like finally come back home. Mm-hmm. So I think for me, I knew that I didn't want to have to return to Australia and be on this like time watch where it's like only having, what is it, like, your 2 weeks of annual leave or 3-4 weeks. I wanted to be able to go back and just like enjoy the time in Australia and enjoy the time with my dad. So for me, I think that was a huge catalyst in quitting my job at the time, so I could then go and return home and not be like on this clock of when I had to come back. And it was probably in between like those moments. My dad ended up passing away in March last year, and I had to return back here after that. And I think it was around that time when I was kind of just like, I knew that I'd quit my job. And around the time, like, my idea was to always go back to New York and either rejoin my company or find something new. And I think it was around that time that, slowly, I guess this seed just like kept growing in the concept of like, well, do I have to go back? Like, what's the reason of me going back? Like, when I've been so happy here, I've been doing this back and forth motion, now for like over a year and a half, and I clearly want to be here. So why am I going back and forth when I should just, pull the cord and just move here?
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of, definitely like an influence that kind of happened around that scenario. Mm-hmm. And I think the way I see it is like everything like perfectly collides. I think one of the reasons why I also had to kind of keep going back between here and Australia and New York was you know the story about Lucho, because Lucho came on the very
Dog.
first night that my dog, he came on the very first night that we did the ecstatic dance.
Yeah.
And so I essentially found this dog at the time, and I had to kind of keep leaving him here with like a friend and returning to him via New York. So a lot of the times I would come back here, spend more time here instead of going straight back to New York. And it's just the feeling just kept growing. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger until it got to the point where I'm like, I can't keep ignoring this.
This dog just started following you that day, right? I think it was the day that you came here to the ecstatic dance. It's the day that the dog just like didn't leave your sight.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. I haven't told many people this, but it was around the time when I was really lost and I didn't really know what I should be doing. And I remember I had this moment where I was actually like looking at my ceiling one night where I was staying, and I was just like, what am I supposed to do? Like, should I go back to New York? Like, should I stay here? Should I be in this job? I was just so confused at the time. And I don't really know who I was talking to. I'm like, just give me a sign. Like anything, like just give me a sign. And 2 days later, this dog all of a sudden showed up on my ATV, jumped on, and I couldn't get rid of him. Like I didn't want a dog. I tried so hard. I would drive off when he wasn't looking, and then like half an hour later he'd walk in like nothing happened into the restaurant and sit at my feet. So he was a huge part. I feel like, I don't know, when I look at signs, he was a really huge part in getting me to consider my time here and him being a reason why I kind of kept coming back here to like either pick him up or you know, take him to different places. So
shout out to Lucho. Where is he? This is like one of the first few times I've seen you without him.
I left him home today.
Okay.
He's napping.
Yeah. And then so you made your decision, like, okay, why should I go back if I love it here so much? Right? What was that like? Maybe if you could take us through a little bit of that thought process, because I'm sure there must have been a lot of programming to break through as to like, well, no, how are you going to live away from the city, away from the people that you know, the things that you know? And what was that thought process like, or that emotional process like to really make the full leap?
Yeah, great question. I think for me, and it's really hard to describe because I know you've talked about this previously in the sense of, you know, when you're in a place, like everything looks good on paper, right? You know, here I was living in New York City. It'd been a dream of mine to move to the city. So working, you know, for this beautiful company, working on amazing brands, you know, living in Brooklyn, had amazing friends, and like everything to me looked, you know, fantastic on paper. But something just felt like it was missing. And it's so hard to like pinpoint this exact moment or this exact thing of what it is, right? But I think, you know, the best way to describe it is it kind of gets to the point where you're asking yourself, am I happy? I think if you have to ask yourself that question, I think it's usually an indicator that perhaps there's other things circulating, there's other things going on inside.
That's such a good point. Like if you have to ask yourself, am I happy? The chances are you're not.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
If it wasn't missing, you wouldn't be wondering if it's there.
Yeah. And you know, how many people, I'm sure, like how many people do you talk to? I know we talked about this before, where you hear people saying, you know, oh, I'll do this in 5 years. I'll do this in 10 years. I'll do this when the kids get older. I just need to stay in this like terrible job for like 1 year so then I can put it on my resume and then I'll look for something new. You know, I think to me is like there's always, you think you have this unlimited amount of time to do something that makes you feel happy. And I think I was very, very fortunate in my life, you know, from both my parents. I lost my mum when I was 16 and she had been battling with cancer like ever since I was 6 years of age. So 10-year fight.
Wow.
And I think for me, that really heavily shaped my outlook on life, to never waste a moment. Like life is, I know this, you know, you probably see this a lot on like memes and like, you know, cards and things, but life really is precious. And I think the biggest the biggest mistake people make is they have time. And I know we're talking, I believe Buddha
Yeah.
said that, which is, something that I really live my life by. And around the time, when I was in New York, when you kind of like, you're listening to people and you're hearing other people say, I want to do this, but, soon, or I would love to do this. I would love to do what you could do. You kind of get to the point and you ask yourself, well, why not? What's stopping me? Why can't I do this? Why can't I move to a country where I don't speak the language and
I totally
live in
get
nature? And
yeah, I get what you're saying, right? Like people think that, okay, maybe later will be better once I save more money or once I find a job that lets me work remotely or some circumstance, right? Like there's usually some circumstance or several that we think will be better in the future than the current circumstances, that then at that point we'll be able to create the life that we desire or dream of. But then I think there's also another piece to it, which is there might be somebody listening right now who's like, okay, I get it. I don't have time. I could die tonight, right? Knock
and
on
it's
wood,
not to scare you
right?
as well. Like I don't want it to be this thing of like your fear of dying and that's why
Right.
you have to do things. It should be, coming from the process of like, I want to enjoy life now, not in
Right.
5-10 years.
And that's what I'm getting at. Well, what about if somebody's like, okay, I get it. Like, I'm with you, Nicolin. Time is running out. Life is short, but I don't see how I can make it work.
Yeah.
That could be. I think that's like the second piece to it, right? The first piece might be, well, not like I know all the pieces to the puzzle, but definitely like one block, because I guess we're talking about taking on creating your dream life, right? So one block would be like, current circumstances aren't ideal. They might be more ideal later, right? And number two, I guess I'm trying to uncover something here with you, which is number two being like, well, I just don't know how, right? Like, how am I going to do it? Like, I just don't see, right? What do you think about that? Like in your own experience, if you look through the lens of your own journey that has you creating your life out here in the jungle of Costa Rica, how do you go from like, all I know is living here, working a job, paying my bills, and like I just don't know how I could make it work any other way.
Yeah. I think for me, I think the biggest thing is you don't have to have it all figured out. I think people seem to think that when they want to do something, you have to have all your ducks in a row, right? You have to have everything figured out before you can take that leap and before you take that jump. I think for me, if you're truly aligning with your values and your mission and what you want, I think you just need to take that leap and take that plunge and just have trust and just have faith. Because at the end of the day, if you're honoring yourself and you're honoring what you know is best for you and what you need, I'm a firm believer that opportunities will happen.
Yeah.
I think for me, and this is coming from like a corporate standpoint, we ask politicians and we ask brands to constantly be putting, their brand, their missions and their values ahead of profits, right? But don't necessarily do the same for ourselves. How many times have I heard situations where people are like, well, I wanted to quit this job, but then they offered me a raise. So I stayed. We need to do the same for ourselves.
Yeah.
And my opinion is once you're aligning with your mission, once you're aligning with your value, that's when the good things come for you. I think for me, when I made the decision to walk away from things that weren't making me happy, as scary and terrifying as it was, and I think it needs to be said here, like, this isn't something that, you just do and you have it figured out the next day. Absolutely not. Like, I'm still figuring it out.
Yeah.
I'm still working through at the moment. But I just found like as soon as I said no to the things that didn't serve me, it's like these opportunities from like other directions like just came into my area.
Yeah.
Like friends were sending me things and I would come across certain other bits
Things
and
like
pieces.
what?
Like opportunities.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, opportunities of different things that I hadn't tried before.
Like what?
Like copywriting jobs.
Oh, okay.
I've always enjoyed writing, so I don't want to like jinx it at the moment, but I've got like this writing gig which is coming up for a publication. So like these things that
Suddenly you
never
became a freelancer. Whoops.
Yeah, suddenly I became a freelancer.
Yeah.
I became a freelancer. It was actually a friend that suggested for me to join Upwork, which is, if anyone's not familiar, it's essentially a freelancing platform.
Yeah.
It's a fantastic platform because it organizes everything for you. And it gave me the opportunity to really like list my skills. And from there, like I was just picking up a whole range of things. Like I feel like it's like a jack of all trades at the moment. I'm really just testing out just different waters and seeing what I align to. And I'm loving it because I feel like I'm discovering things that I never thought that I could do.
So you're also an entrepreneur now.
I don't know if I want to call I don't know if I want to call myself that.
Well, you're self-employed. You call yourself that.
True. But it's interesting. I don't necessarily see myself that. I think it's more just when you take the plunge to do something that isn't serving you, I guess my biggest point is like opportunities and new things will come about.
Yeah.
And use the time to discover. What other things are out there for you.
Yeah, I love the point that you made. I don't think it could have been said any better, where as we're looking at the obstacles in the way of creating our dream life, number one being like, well, circumstances aren't ideal right now. And number two, we got to, I just don't know how I can make it work. Your answers was, well, you don't have to have it all figured out. And it reminded me of The Alchemist. Have you read The Alchemist?
I have.
Yes. If you all listening haven't read The Alchemist, please go read it, because this is pretty much like totally on point with what the book is all about. In the book, the main character, he's pursuing this thing that he calls his personal legend, right? Which we might call your purpose, or you might call like creating your dream life, or like living your dreams, or whatever you might want to call it, right? In essence, is this phenomenon of just following your heart, pursuing your passion, and living your dreams. That's what in The Alchemist is referred to as your personal legend. And there's this beautiful quote somewhere in the book, maybe you can't help me, that it goes something like, when you follow your heart in pursuit of your dreams, the whole universe conspires to help you get it, right? You remember that?
Yes.
So in a way, it's like you said, and it's almost like the dog, I have so many experiences the same. If you listen to other episodes of my podcast, you'll hear, especially episode 19, where I told my whole story of like 2021, how like all of a sudden it was just like, I couldn't help, I'm not a very woo-woo person, even though some people might argue otherwise. I'm very pragmatic, very logical, very rational. I've been my whole life, and actually it's taken a lot of work to learn to connect to my heart, but I still see things through a very rational lens. And it got to a point where I couldn't help but feel and notice like, wow, there's something at play. Like whoever's pulling the strings behind the scenes here, like there's definitely, first of all, somebody or something pulling strings behind the curtain of our reality right now. And they seem to be doing it in my favor, because things that are highly coincidental, that are very convenient for me, are suddenly happening. Like meeting Darren at a super random thing that I drove an hour and a half to, because some girl told me like, oh, follow this Instagram account, I think you'll like it, because I went to help her get her tire changed. Like the one time I hung out with my neighboring person in Potrero, to then having Darren tell me like, this is definitely the town that I want to come, that I got to come check out next, to then like the motorcycle that I bought from our friend Woof.
Yes, yes.
Because all of a sudden this opportunity to move up here showed up, and I'm like, I only had a bicycle. I couldn't keep renting the car. I was renting for $1,400 a month.
Oh my God.
Yeah, we know how much it costs to rent vehicles here. I was like, man, it'd be awesome to live up there, but I don't know, I can go up the hill on my bicycle, and then like within 24 hours, boom, motorcycle for sale for $300. I still have that moto, and I've gone across Costa Rica on it, and it's, and I mean, that's just a small piece of it. I could go on and on and on about how everything turned up, even like getting more business. All of a sudden, when I first came down to Costa Rica, I thought like, oh man, I'm going to be away from my usual work environment. It's going to be unfamiliar. I might not be able to be as productive or get in the zone as much. All of a sudden my business was booming. you know, I was getting referrals from people. Even still, like if you're familiar with like the world of VAs and virtual assistants, you know, things like freelancers, this might make sense to you. But like this one freelancer I hired through like a freelance firm, it wasn't like even I hired him directly, right? I hire a company who gives me a manager, then they give me someone. They gave me somebody to make telemarketing calls for me. So I trained them once a week for about an hour every week for a few months until eventually the whole thing didn't work out. We just closed it. That at least I stopped using that telemarketing company. Then like recently, like a month ago, this guy from where is he again? From Jordan, where the telemarketing company was, calls me like from his cell phone, like hits or Skype or something. I don't even know how he got my contact information. He's like, "Hey, Caesar, you might remember me. I was working in that company that you hired. You know, I have a really awesome job now, and I want to, and I have a lead for you. I have this potential client for you, you know, and I wanted to send it your way because if it weren't for you, I wouldn't have the skills I've been using that I really needed to be able to have this job now." Because he was happy about all the training I provided him. So it was so random that this like outsourced person just hit me up to like refer me like a potential client. Yeah, and now this is a huge hospital that is totally gonna change and create a whole new opportunity within my business to work with companies internationally. You know, so far all my clients are in the US. So I might be doing a marketing campaign for somebody in Turkey because he's actually in Turkey. He moved from Jordan to Turkey. Crazy.
Congratulations. Well, yeah, if you get the lead. Like, I don't know if I'm getting ahead of myself.
Yeah, no, thank you. It's, you know, like I said, I could go on and on and on and on, even about like my partner, Alana, now, who's 7.5 months pregnant, and like, what are the chances? I mean, there's so many synchronicities around like just us meeting, to her like still staying in town, to for long enough for me to connect with her, and like just so much. So anyways, takes me back to that quote, right? Like when you go in pursuit of what's in your heart, when you're following your heart, it's like the whole universe conspires to help you get it, you know? So long story short, yeah, you don't have to have it all figured out. I think we're also very, what's the word? Like human beings, like we are tenacious in a way, you know, like by nature, we're good at figuring things out.
We're intuitive.
Yeah. We're intuitive. So you put yourself in that environment, and all of a sudden, like, you just make it work. You know, it's just really it.
And I think it's paying, like, to your point, I think it's paying attention to those signs. I think sometimes when you're distracted, I think the signs are always there, but when you're distracted, you're not really paying attention to them. And I think when you kind of come to, you know, a place like this where all of a sudden, like, things just slow down, you have time to reflect, you have time to like see certain things and see like directions that perhaps you're like getting hinted to like move towards, or opportunities that come up that you want to chase. And I think that's the key, to be able to like zoom out, have a larger picture, and just kind of look at like, you know, which directions you can take. And I think I also just, you know, do want to caveat that it isn't one of those things where you kind of like take a plunge and a leap and you're living, you know, the same life that you had the next day, but just without, you know, without like an income coming in. Like you have to also make adjustments. And I think if you really genuinely believe that you're doing the right thing and that you're going to be following your heart and what's right for you, you know, things will come. But in the meantime, you are going to have to make some adjustments in the sense of, you know, my income cut by 3/4, you know, at least. So it's just like things like that. You have to figure out how you make this work within certain circumstances, and be patient that, you know, it's not going to happen overnight. Like it's going to take time, but at the end of the day, you know, I have faith that I'm on the right path and I'll get there wherever it is. But right now, it's just you got to take time and patience to let things come and to figure things out.
Amen. Yeah, absolutely. And tell me what you think about this, because this is another phenomenon that I noticed for myself, and I think nature has maybe everything to do with it as well in this case. that phenomenon is being immersed in such a beautiful environment where nature is so much pronounced. Suddenly, as we are living that beautiful life, the things that seem to not be in alignment with our soul, our heart, I don't know what you might want to call it, but like all of a sudden there's this contrast where like certain things that we've been carrying in our life, all of a sudden it becomes very clear that, wait, this I think is something that is not for me anymore, or this is something that I can afford to let go of now because it's not in alignment with my truth, right? Let's call it that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you noticed that for yourself?
Yeah. Do you mean, I guess, the things that don't serve you? Is that
Yeah, like for me in my experience.
What do you think you let go of?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also in that process as well of figuring
Yeah.
it out because I came here with my marketing agency and I said, yeah, my marketing agency all of a sudden started doing better. And that was kind of like a nice reassurance that like, yeah, wow, I can actually make it work here. But then even just like the agency itself, if all I were to do was just, get more clients, I work mostly with dentists, just get more dentists in my portfolio and help them get more patients. If I were to just stop at that,
Mm-hmm.
like at this point in my life, I just couldn't. I couldn't just keep doing that because it's lacking of meaning and
Purpose.
substance and purpose,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think it goes back to what you were saying, where in the environment where things are moving more slowly, where there's more time for yourself, where you're living more simply, you start to notice these things that are not so much in alignment,
Mm-hmm.
right? So I guess that's what I'm speaking to, that I've noticed is a phenomenon that happens when you disconnect and you go to nature and you immerse yourself in it and you start just loving your experience of the day, of the moment. There's joy. All of a sudden it becomes very clear, like the things that are meant to stay in your life and the things that are meant that you're meant to move away from.
It's clarity. I mean, I feel nature is my meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you meditate like regularly in the mornings. For me, I've always struggled with meditation.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know why. Maybe it's the environments that I've been in, but for me, meditation is going and sitting on the beach, like watching a sunset, sitting out, in the lineup in the ocean,
Mm-hmm.
on my surfboard.
Well, that's definitely a
And
meditation.
yeah, I think that's for me. I think going back to your point, like in the sense of nature just gives you this beautiful clarity. And I think for this first time when I was really thinking about things and when I was coming to certain decisions, I feel like a lot of the time I was present in nature. I was, nature kind of becomes like a main character in your life here.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So I think definitely, like to your point, very, very helpful into giving me clarity and an
Yeah.
understanding.
Yeah. Yeah. Darren shared this and when I first interviewed him in the podcast, and I definitely experienced this for myself now. I recently started my coaching practice, which is something that I love doing, that I went back to after taking some time off of Landmark. Now I'm doing coaching on my own, mostly focusing on helping men connect to their hearts and their purpose, and also relationship coaching, because that's just something that for some reason I seem to be effective with. But yeah, I'm working with somebody right now to help him connect to his purpose, discover his purpose. And what I realize is, you know what? You don't need to try and figure out your purpose. You just need to create a life that you love. And before you know it, your purpose is going to be so obvious. So what do you think about that?
I completely agree. I think we get too caught up in, back when I was trying to figure out, I'm like, all right, what do I want to do after PR? Got so caught up in like, what are my passions? And I think that can sometimes be a really hard question, because it's like, well, if I knew what I'm exactly passionate about, I'd probably already be working in that, right? So I think it's less about trying to like define and figure out like that exact passion or that exact interest that you have. I think it's more about gravitating towards things, like to your point, that give you joy, that give you happiness, the things that you want to wake up and do every day, or only, you know, a few days a week, or whatever that looks like, as opposed to having to like pinpoint like this thing that we have to put so much pressure on to choose, and that be like the rest of our lives.
Yeah, and the more I've dug into that, the more it starts to make sense to me. I was just talking to Alana about this a couple of days ago. I mean, it is a worthwhile question if you're sitting there, you know, in your life, you're feeling like something's missing, maybe like some sort of meaning or higher purpose. So we start to look outside, like, man, I got to go find my purpose. But one thing that to me started to make a lot of sense is looking at desire, right? Because desire is something that you can feel, and it's so much like inside of you. You're so in touch with it. Or maybe we might be a bit disconnected from our desires if we've just haven't pursued our desires in a very long time. But if you just take a moment to, this is what Darren shared, that if you're trying to sort all this out, like just go to nature, you know, take some time off and go to nature for several days, a week, 2 weeks, and before you know it, you'll sort it out. But yeah, I think what starts to happen is you start to notice what my desires are, right? Like, oh wow, I notice I desire going for the surf in the morning before going to work. You know, I see that I desire helping people with this topic in their lives. I see that I desire, like, you know, to read more. I see that I desire to write more. I see that I desire to play music. I see that I desire whatever, right? There might be some issue in the world that you have a desire to like support and help resolve. Maybe you're very talented at something, and you notice that there's a desire to express that talent further, right? And I think that our desire is actually the key to then start to see what our truth is, right? I don't think we can find that our desire is in contradiction of our truth, because your desire is very real. It's inside of you.
Yeah.
Right? So you explore your desire, and before you know it, you're creating a life that feels more aligned. And before you know it, like, you know exactly what you want to do with your life. You know?
I think that's a beautiful way of putting it.
Yeah.
I very much agree with that. I think it is about desire and the things that make you tick. I think we were talking a little bit before about energy, right? And I think kind of going back to, you know, you asked me kind of like the reason I felt my energy was being drained and sucked away from me. Whereas like here, it's about finding the things that charge you and the things that excite you. And I think that very much goes into the concept of desire, right? Because if you're desiring something, that energy is just going to lift you up and charge you and like make you, you know, light you up again.
Yeah. Wow. Well, this is such a rich conversation, you know, that we could just go on and on. So since we're pretty much about to wrap it up, why don't you just tell us what's next for you? How are you currently like figuring it out? How are you making it work? Like in the next couple minutes, why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, definitely. I think for me, it's all about like exploration at the moment. I'm really trying to figure out, all right, what are the things, you know, that make me tick? What are the things that get me excited? I think at the moment Upwork has been a fantastic platform for me to really be able to choose like the projects and the gigs that align with me. I've recently discovered that not necessarily like a recent discovery, but I love writing. So I think that's very much what I'm getting into at the moment, in the sense of, you know, content writing, you know, writing articles, other bits and pieces. So I'm finding a lot of like pleasure and satisfaction in getting back into that. And I think the key for me is right now is, you know, take the time to figure it out. I kind of said to myself, this is the year, like give yourself this year just to sort things out and explore and figure out the things that align with you. And I made that promise to myself, and I'm really just saying like yes to, you know, to any opportunity, or the opportunities that, you know, resonate with me, and just trying it and giving it a go. If it's something that I don't know how to do, well, I'm just going to dig in and see what happens. And I think that's the key. I think where you can challenge yourself and explore different things. And I'm working across so many different, you know, industries at the moment in terms of writing, and I'm loving it.
Yeah.
I'm finding myself excited again.
Beautiful. Yeah. And I love that, you know, that's such a perfect demonstration of you don't have to have it all figured out. Because in fact, a beautiful aspect of life, or a beautiful thing we get to do in life, is explore. How boring would it be if we just had all the answers and all we had to do was follow the template, you know?
Exactly.
No, it's an exploration. There's a mystery to it. Dance with it. Explore what you might like. Explore what you don't like, you know? And before you know it, like, you fall in love with something. So thank you for being in the Love is Our Nature podcast, Nicolin. Really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Is there any last words before we say bye?
No, I think that's everything. I think, the best advice I can give to someone is, I understand how like scary and terrifying it can be, to put your mind towards something that you want to do in life, but just have hope and have faith, and I think you just have to like believe in yourself that it'll always work out for the best, and the universe has your back.
Beautiful. Well, there you have it. Thank you for tuning in to the Love is Our Nature podcast. Thank you, Nicolin, for joining us today. If you want to follow Nicolin, she's on Instagram. Can I tag you on Instagram?
Yeah, sure.
All right, I'll tag you on Instagram. You can click in the description to see what adventures she's in, what she's creating for her life right now. And
good photos of Lucho.
Yeah, photos of the dog. And follow your heart. The whole universe will conspire to help you make it happen. We love you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
That is all, folks. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Thank you for being a valued listener. If you haven't already, remember to subscribe to the podcast in whatever your favorite platform is. You can also watch the video version of the episode on the Love is Our Nature YouTube channel. Check out loveisOurNature.com as well. That's where you can see our latest news and most recent content. If you enjoyed the episode, leave a review, share it with your friends, or email me. I love hearing what you took away for yourself out of listening. My email is Caesar@loveIsOurNature.com. That's CESAR, or Cesar, like my mother says it, at loveIsOurNature.com altogether. Till next time, I'll be here rooting for you. And remember, whatever the question, love is the answer.